The city recently approved a zoning framework for the former Suffolk Downs, mostly in East Boston. Overall, developers plan 10,000 units of housing along with office and retail space and some new parkland. The framework approved recently by the Boston Planning and Development Agency also includes commitments to affordable housing, emergency housing assistance, construction jobs, and workforce training. But for many East Boston residents, the commitments are much less than what's needed. Sharing that perspective are two guests who've been following the development process: Suffolk Downs neighbor Maria Carolina and a resident who's a staff member of Solidarity, Stephen Mahood. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to start with Maria Carolina. You are, as you describe yourself, a Suffolk Downs neighbor, meaning you live pretty close to this. So why exactly are you so concerned about this project?
So I've been a neighbor to the Suffolk Downs property for over 13 years and an East Sea resident for over 17. East Boston has been my home since I came to this country from Venezuela, and is where I've settled, and my family has settled as well. And I was very concerned when I first here and saw the graphics that the Suffolk Downs had back in 2017, because it reminded me a lot of Assembly Row in Somerville. And it was it just didn't seem like East Boston at all. And it was very concerning because for the past 6 years, I've been seeing East Boston change drastically. There's been a lot of displacement. There's been a lot of gentrification. You know, the neighborhood has been changing. Some businesses have been, like local immigrant businesses have been closing. And, you know, this magnitude of a project, which would be about like 4 or 5 assembly rows, maybe more, it is very concerning because it's going to change our neighborhood even more than it already has. And also, you know, little by little, the immigrant community has been leaving, and it will continue to push them away.
Stephen, what about your perspective? Why are you so concerned?
Well, for very similar reasons, but also, you know, this is a project that, I mean, Suffolk Downs itself has been here since, what, the 1930s when it was first constructed. But it's an opportunity for the city to actually right a lot of the errors of its ways. And it unfortunately is a project that the city didn't take the initiative to actually do anything with. When they have the opportunity to actually get the land, they chose not to. And instead they let a billionaire, William Bruce Harrison, who's an oil-rich billionaire from Houston, Texas, to come in and really dictate what he wants. And this is, you know, a failed attempt to try to include what the community is and what the community wants. And so the reason I feel concerned is because, for the same reasons, it's such a large project that it's going to have such an impact that this community has fought so many things. And it's just another thing for us to have to organize around to fight for what we actually need. And it's not fulfilling what we actually need. The overdevelopment that I've seen in the last 5 years that I moved back to East Boston has been tremendous. The last time I had been in East Boston before that, when I was living before I moved out of the country, was in 2010. And the difference between then and 2015 was huge. And the difference between 2015 and now, you can barely recognize what this neighborhood is anymore because of how much large upscale development has been put in. And it's not giving a place for any of the working class neighbors to actually move to or stay. And so the displacement has been tremendous. And so I felt like this project itself was going to further accelerate that and not do anything to actually accommodate it.
Maria Carolina, almost any development project in Boston these days can change the perception of a neighborhood, meaning the perceived market values. And of course, that can be a problem for the people who are already living in the neighborhood. How much do you see this project making things worse?
As my mother being a homeowner of where I'm living is a concern for the property taxes, a concern that now, you know, some people have been having a hard time paying their mortgage due to being in a pandemic. And, you know, it brings an opportunity to even have small homeowners be also tout. of their home. And, you know, as an immigrant, East Boston is known to be a rich immigrant community. We have different communities, like from Arabic communities, Latin American communities, Vietnamese communities, and it's um, it's hard to start from scratch. When people come here, you have to start from scratch. And, you know, even owning properties is some form of wealth that you can pass down to your generations that will make it easier for them. And I feel like a lot of us are already struggling in that. And, you know, in East Boston, you know, that's being taken away from us as well.
Stephen, the developers are making a commitment to affordable units on site that would still be out of reach for a lot of people in East Boston. They are also committing to other kinds of help with the need for affordable housing. If you balance those two, where do you see this coming out?
Well, I mean, first off, those things would never have been, those were not things that HYM and Tom O'Brien were trying to do. They were trying to prevent any of those extensions. And it came from a lot of the community organizing, such as Pueblo, to put pressure on this project to get more housing out of it. The problem is that the 13% that they committed to by default is the bare minimums required by the city.
And that's just the on-site housing.
That's just the on-site housing, and the AMI, the average or area median income levels for it are still above the average of what the community has. And it's still not clear, at least at this point, and maybe there's been updates that I'm not aware of, that the offsite may be closer to it. But overall, what we have seen, I mean, I myself am on the BPDA list for affordable units, and all the units that you see in East Boston, or most of them, are well above even 80% AMI. And that's, you know, if we're looking at 50% as the median, the previous developments that are under previous administration, the city hasn't done anything to rectify that. And it should be rectified in this project, which, because of its scale, should have a heck of a lot more than that, especially on site, because the on site is important. Because if we want to integrate these communities, and if we want to bring in the people who have more means, then we need to be further expanding the spaces for people who don't have the means to do it. And right now, 87% of that property is market rate. And what does that mean for a community that can't afford that? So 87% of the people that will live there are not going to be coming from this community. So it clearly just creates this window that is unfortunately not what we want and what we need. It's really what the city's image is, but not taking on what the city should be embracing, which is a community that already exists here, right? So,
Caroline, I want to ask about some of the open space implications, because the project does include some park areas, and I think because of community pressure, there's going to be more public access to those. But on the other hand, this is also cheek by jowl with Belle Isle Marsh, which is environmentally vulnerable. The developers say they're going to try to deal with that in some way, but are you still worried about what's going to happen with Belle Isle Marsh?
Yes. So my understanding is that the property of Suffolk Downs, where I live, and I live right next to Belle Isle Marsh, it was all marsh, and it is now filled in land. So the places where I live, the area, we do not have any basements, any of the homes either. And I'm not an environment expert, but one of our Pueblo members has mentioned that the area where they plan to have the open space is actually a big flooding area. And it's interesting that, you know, it is advertised as an area where anybody can come in, anybody in the community can come in and play, do picnics, movies, etc. Yet is something that is very likely to be flooded all the time. So what would the point be of a space that is advertised now today, but in 20, 25 years is going to be usually flooded?
Stephen, I want to ask you about the amount of leverage the community had here, because with a development like this, on the one hand, the developers need some significant zoning relief from the city. So the city has that kind of leverage. On the other hand, they own the property. So, I mean, how far can you push them?
well, I mean, that's a good question. And it's really a matter of what the motivation is on the city side. And so, you know, regulations, the zoning and everything else is in the hands of the city. And the city may put the argument of like, oh, well, if we push too much, we'll get no development. Well, to be honest, when it comes to displacement, no development might actually be a better benefit, because it gives us more time to think about what we actually need from this project, and to actually have the community actually engage in it. The problem is the BPDA process itself doesn't allocate for that. There's no accountability that we have to try to get these demands in there. And I think the way the city posed it is, we have to do something, otherwise we lose it all. But the thing is, we heard that a year ago when Tom and HYM were saying, oh, we can't do the other 7%. Oh, we can't do this. Well, somehow they decided that they could. So clearly there's a lot more room to push, and it's a matter of taking into the reality of where a lot of capital is making its revenue and their profits from, and it's property, it's land development and overdevelopment in that sense. And so that's just a matter of understanding the economics of the situation. We've seen towers. HYM had put up a tower over by Government Center. That's theirs too. So it's not like this is the first time they've done this. And it's not like the BPDA doesn't have the analysis of this. They just bought into the argument that HYM put forward. And so instead of listening to what we actually can try to push more out of this, it would have been better for it this way. The other kind of connection to that, though, is the way HYM played this game. They got a project labor agreement, which is great. I'm glad that it's going to be a union project. But in this BPDA meeting that we had last week, HYM tried to get the unions to fight the community and trying to get us to be into this battle, which is not where we are. We actually want it to be a union project, but we want it to be a project that's actually developing what we need, and not what William Bruce Harrison needs or wants, for that matter, which is a cash cow. I mean, this is majority going to be rentals. They're going to be luxury rentals. So you can see the way this is going to go. And I think the city should have put more pressure on this, because the amount of money that William Bruce Harrison paid for this property, I think was 150 or somewhere around $150 million. They could just sell it right now and still make a profit without doing any development, because of the speculation and everything else. So there's clearly more that the city could have put pressure on. And as a community was getting organized, they had more reason to, but they chose not to, which means that, our work is cut out for us. We have to continue to organize to put pressure on the city to do the right thing, instead of the mayor, in this case, doing the wrong thing.
Well, I'm sure we'll have some places along the line in the future where we can revisit. Thank you both very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you.
Stephen Mahood and Maria Carolina.